My boyfriend broke up with me over red flags after listening to his best friend, then begged me to take him back. Here's what happened. I, 23F, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, Mark, 24M, for almost 8 months now. Mark has never had a steady girlfriend for this long before. Most of his exes were flings that didn't last more than 3 or 4 months. So, of course, I like to think that this relationship was special for him. But a few days ago, I realized that might not be the case. Mark's best friend, Sophia, 24F, has been his neighbor for over 14 years. They met when they were 10 years old and have been best friends ever since. They went to the same school, the same college, and even work at the same place now. So when I say best friend, I really mean best friend. Mark doesn't make a single decision without consulting Sophia first. Even his decision to date me wasn't entirely his own. Like he later told me, every girl he's ever dated had to be Sophia approved, and if Sophia wanted him to break up with someone, he would. This weird dependency was a huge red flag, but Mark only told me about it 4 months into the relationship, when I was already in too deep. Had I known earlier, I probably wouldn't have even gone on a first date with him. As for my relationship with Sophia, it wasn't horrible. At first, we were civil to each other, but she always gave off subtle vibes that Mark would always be hers first. Anytime the three of us hung out, she made me feel excluded, and I never felt truly comfortable around her. I tried my best to be friends with her initially, but my efforts were in vain. She'd already decided she didn't like me. To make matters worse, I think she saw me as competition, something she couldn't tolerate. A few days ago, I got really sick. Since I live away from home for work and my roommate was out of town, I was all alone. I don't usually rely on guys for help, but this time I decided to call Mark and ask if he could come over and take care of me. Mark seemed hesitant, and I assumed he didn't want to catch whatever I had. I told him it was just a stomach bug and he'd be fine. But even then, he didn't seem eager to help. When I pressed him about it, he finally told me that he had plans to watch a movie and grab lunch with Sophia, so he wasn't sure if he'd be able to make it. I was already feeling awful, and his priorities made me furious. I ended up snapping at him, telling him he could date Sophia before hanging up on him. I ignored his calls after that. About an hour later, Mark showed up at my place with homemade soup and apologized profusely. He told me he'd canceled his plans with Sophia and stayed the entire day to take care of me. By the time he left that night, I felt better, both physically and emotionally. But I didn't realize that my actions that day would have consequences. The very next day, Mark ghosted me. He didn't call or text, and I couldn't reach him either. I was panicked, thinking something bad had happened to him. Finally, around midnight, he called me back. He sounded serious and upset. After checking if I was feeling better, he told me I might want to sit down for what he was about to say. Then he broke up with me. First, I thought it was a prank. But Mark continued, saying it was hard for him to come to this conclusion, but that my behavior was full of red flags, and he couldn't be with me anymore. I was in shock. As far as I knew, I hadn't done anything that could be considered a red flag. I'd always tried to be a good person and a good girlfriend. I couldn't understand where this was coming from. Mark hung up on me without giving me a proper explanation and blocked me on everything. I was devastated. For the next couple of days, I was miserable. I kept replaying our last interactions in my head, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Then, out of the blue, Mark called me. As soon as I answered, he started apologizing hysterically. He told me he hadn't wanted to break up with me but had been pressured into it by Sophia. Apparently, she was upset that he'd canceled their plans to take care of me and convinced him that it was a red flag. She also brought up other red flags, like how I cooked his favorite meals or bought clothes for him. According to Sophia, these were all tactics to control his life. Mark admitted he'd fallen for her lies and broke up with me because of her. Now he was begging me to take him back and promised to keep our relationship a secret from Sophia to avoid future problems. I was furious. After days of blaming myself for the breakup, I now realized it was all Sophia's fault. She couldn't handle the fact that Mark chose to take care of me instead of spending the day with her, so she sabotaged our relationship. Mark's spinelessness also infuriated me. He was so blind to Sophia's manipulative behavior that he still wasn't willing to cut her off. Instead, he suggested keeping our relationship a secret to appease her. I told him I'd only get back with him on one condition. He had to text Sophia and tell her off for controlling his life. I even dictated what he should write, making sure it was as harsh as possible. Mark was hesitant, but I told him it was the only way I'd take him back. Desperate, he sent the text and even showed me a screenshot as proof. As soon as he did, I hung up and blocked him everywhere. In the days that followed, Sophia called me from an unknown number to berate me. I let her rant for a bit before snapping and reminding her that Mark had chosen me over her, even if only temporarily. She ended up crying, and I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. A few days later, Mark and Sophia showed up at a mutual friend's party. Mark tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, but I turned the tables and called him out for being Sophia's puppet. Sophia lost her cool and started yelling, but I kept my composure, knowing I'd won. It's been 3 months since the showdown at the party. Mark and Sophia are now officially dating. I guess they finally realized no one else would put up with them. As for me, I've moved on and started seeing someone new. Hopefully, this time, there won't be any psycho best friends involved.